Hi everyone, welcome back to Random Talk with NG. My name is Ngozi Obiefuna, and last week I started the discussion or the conversation on the topic, the ego trap. Today and next week, when I conclude, we would continue. I'll try to give as much scenarios as I can, and I would also infuse comments and stories from some of my listeners who had reached out to me privately to share their thoughts on this. Well, if you want me to consider or to also read out your comment or your feedback on this particular topic, please do well to drop a comment, right? Do well to drop a comment, and I'll be sure to read it out in the concluding episode next week. So let's get right into it. You know, I mentioned last week that we're going to tackle another subtle form of ego that affects our society every day. I'm older than you, and this is when age becomes an ego. There's something we hear almost every day, maybe at home, maybe at work, maybe in church, maybe in the market, maybe even on social media. The sentence goes something like this: I am older than you, or I no be your mate. I am not your mate. Now, before anyone misunderstands me, let me say this very clearly. Respect for elders is important. It's one of the values that holds many families and communities together, and we should never become a generation that mistakes confidence for disrespect. But here's the problem. Sometimes people don't ask for respect. They demand that age automatically makes them right. And those two are very different things. Age deserves respect. Wisdom deserves admiration. But age and wisdom are not always the same thing. Because think about it. Someone can spend 30 years making the same mistake. That doesn't become 30 years of wisdom. It becomes 1 year of experience repeated 30 times. Real wisdom comes from learning, reflecting, changing, and growing. Now, picture this young employee. A young graduate joins a company. He's energetic, curious, full of ideas. And then during a meeting, he politely suggests a faster way to complete a task. Before he finishes speaking, an older colleague interrupts. We've been doing this before you were born. I've even experienced this before. That's happened to me. Everybody laughs. The conversation ends. Not because the idea was bad, but because ego rejected the person before considering the idea. 6 months later, another team adopts the exact same approach. It saves time. It increases profit. It reduces burnouts. Now everyone says, "Oh, that's brilliant." Funny, isn't it? Sometimes we reject good ideas simply because of who they are coming from, not because they are wrong. Because our ego struggles to believe wisdom can come from someone younger. I have this friend of mine, Ola, and one thing I love about my friend Ola is that Ola listens to everyone. He does not say, "Oh, because you do not have this number of years of experience as I do, or because you're not this old, or because you are too young, you cannot suggest things." My friend Ola listens to both the old and the young. And that is something that shows that this person does not have the ego trap. Let me tell you something simple. And this story was shared by one of my listeners who chose to be anonymous. Imagine you walk into a barber shop. There is an older barber who's been cutting hair for 25 years. Beside him is a younger barber who learns the newest style, techniques, and trends. Which one would you choose? Some people immediately choose the older barber because they don't want to see that, this person has helped to recede my hairline and all those things. Others choose the younger one. But here's the point. Neither age nor youth automatically guarantees excellence. Skill does. Character does. Continuous learning does. The older barber who keeps learning stays relevant. The younger barber who becomes arrogant also stops growing. Do you notice something? Ego doesn't care about age. It can live inside a teenager, it can live inside a 70-year-old. Some parents have probably said this before. Don't ask questions. Do it because I said so. Sometimes that's unnecessary. Sometimes that's necessary. And it's necessary, especially when children are very young or in danger. But imagine carrying that mindset into every conversation. Your children grow older. They become adults. They start asking thoughtful questions. Instead of listening, you silence them. Not because they are disrespectful, because your ego mistakes questions for rebellion. Years later, those children stop sharing their thoughts. Not because they don't have any, because they've learned they won't be heard. Now, think about how many families live like this. Not because there is no love, but because there is no room for dialogue. Now, let's move beyond age. Let's talk about titles. Doctor, engineer, pastor, high chief, double high chief, CEO, sir and lady, professor, director, manager. These are all beautiful achievements. You should celebrate them. You've worked hard for them. Be proud of your achievements, right? Be proud of your accomplishments. But never confuse your title with your identity. Because titles can open doors. Only character keeps them open. Some people will claim that other things can keep them open. But let's be honest, only character keeps them open. Have you noticed that some people become completely different after getting promoted? Yesterday, they greeted everyone. Today, they barely make eye contact and they're waiting for you to worship the ground which they walk on. Yesterday, they listened. Today, nobody can advise them. Who do you think you are? We're not mates. Why would you do this? Yesterday, they laughed with everyone. Today, everyone must book an appointment just to say hello. What changed? The title? No, the ego. Because promotion didn't create pride. It revealed what was already there. Let's talk about wealth. Money is a wonderful tool. It can improve lives. It can create opportunities, support families, help communities. There is nothing wrong with wanting financial success. But money also reveals character. Have you noticed how some people change after becoming wealthy? The people who supported them during difficult seasons suddenly become invisible. Old friends become beneath them. They no longer return calls. They treat waiters badly. Security guards become invisible. Cleaners don't deserve greetings. They begin measuring people's worth by what they own. And that's ego wearing expensive clothes. But here is something life keeps proving over and over. Money can buy attention. It cannot buy genuine respect. Money can buy luxury. It cannot buy humility. Money can buy comfort. It cannot buy peace. If your bank account grows but your humility shrinks, you may have become richer financially but poorer as a human being. I once heard someone say, if you really want to know someone's character, watch how they treat people who can't do anything for them. Think about that. Anyone can be kind to their boss. They may just be sucking up to them, right? Anyone can smile at an important client. Anyone can impress someone powerful. But how do you speak to the cleaner? How do you respond to the housekeeper or to the security guard? How do you treat the waiter who accidentally spills your drink? How do you greet the driver? How do you greet the doorman? How do you respond to someone who cannot advance your career? Those moments reveal the real person, not the polished version, the real one. Because humility isn't tested by how you treat people above you. It's tested by how you treat people below you. And now to social media. Let's be honest. Social media has made ego harder to recognize. Today, many people don't just live life, they perform it. Every achievement must be announced or posted. Every gift must be displayed. Every vacation becomes a photo shoot. Every meal becomes content. Now, there's nothing wrong with sharing your life. There's nothing wrong at all. The problem begins when your happiness depends on other people's reactions, when likes become your source of confidence, When comments determine your mood. As how? When you feel less valuable because someone else's post looks more successful than yours. Ego doesn't always say, I'm better than everyone. Sometimes it says, I need everyone to think I'm doing better than I really am. And that's another trap. Because eventually, you become exhausted trying to maintain an image instead of building a life. Let me leave you with this thought before we move on to another form of ego. The smartest person in the room isn't always the one talking the most. Sometimes it's the one asking the best questions, because humble people never stop learning. Ego says, I already know. Don't tell me what to do. It's not today that I started this work. But humility says, teach me something I don't know. And that simple difference can change the entire direction of your life. Now, let me ask you this question. Have you ever smiled at someone, congratulated them, told them, I'm really happy for you, but deep inside, something didn't feel right? Maybe you weren't angry, maybe you weren't even jealous in the obvious sense, but you couldn't stop comparing. Why them? I've worked harder. I've been praying longer. I'm more qualified. How did they get there before me? Why should they be the one with this juicy job offer? If you've ever had thoughts like that, you're not alone. Comparison is one of the quietest ways ego creeps into our lives. Not because we hate the other person, no, but because their success begins to feel like proof of our failure, and that's a dangerous lie. One of the biggest misconceptions we have is that everyone is running the same race. We're not, though. Imagine two people standing at a bus stop. One bus arrives heading to Lekki, another heads to Ikeja. Would it make sense for the person going to Lekki to jump onto the Ikeja bus just because it arrived first? Of course not. Different destinations, different routes, different timing, yet that's exactly what we do in life. We compare our chapter 3 to someone else's chapter 12. We compare our beginning to someone else's breakthrough. We compare our behind the scenes to their 60 seconds highlight reel. Then we conclude that we are behind. But behind who now? Then bond it off now together. Who created the timeline you're trying to follow? Society? Social media? Friends? Family? Or your ego? Think about a group of friends. They all graduated around the same time. They all dreamed together. One friend gets a great job. Another starts a successful business. One gets married. Another travels abroad. One buys a car. Another buys a house. Slowly, something changes. The WhatsApp group becomes quieter. Not because everyone is busy, but because comparison has entered the room. Some people stop congratulating others. Some stop attending celebrations. Some become distant, not because they don't love their friends, but because every success reminds them of what they don't yet have. And that's one of the saddest things ego does. It turns someone else's blessings into your burden. Instead of saying, if it's possible for them, maybe it's possible for me too. Ego whispers, life isn't fair. They are lucky. They probably had connections. Something suspicious must have happened. Notice how ego rarely allows us to simply celebrate. It always wants an explanation. Now, one of the greatest signs of maturity is being able to celebrate someone else's victory while you are still waiting for your own. That isn't easy, and I know I can relate, but let's be honest, it hurts sometimes. You attend another wedding while you are still praying for your own partner. You celebrate someone else's job offer or promotion while you have been overlooked again. You watch your friend's business grow while yours is barely surviving. Those moments are real. And it's okay to acknowledge the pain, but don't let pain become bitterness, because bitterness is often ego saying, if I don't have it, nobody deserves it, nobody should. Here is something I've learned. You never lose by celebrating someone else. My friend will always say, hey, if it happened for you, that means God is in our neighborhood. Joy isn't a limited resource. Someone else's success doesn't reduce your chances. It simply reminds you that good things are still happening in the world. Let me use a simple analogy. Imagine there's a power outage. Your neighbor buys a generator. Instead of being happy that at least one family has lights where you can go and plug all your devices, some people say, he's showing off. He thinks he's rich now. Instead of generator, let's even use solar power, solar panels. Let's see how long it lasts. But what if it simply worked hard and saved for it? What if it had nothing to do with showing off? Sometimes ego makes us assign bad motives to other people's blessings because accepting that they earned it feels uncomfortable, and that's a difficult truth. Have you ever noticed that some people turn everything into a competition? You buy a phone, next week they buy a more expensive one. I had someone like that back then in the university. You move into a new apartment, they suddenly need a bigger house. You mention you're learning a new skill, they immediately begin listing 10 things they've already mastered. Some people don't know how to have conversations, they only know how to compete. Why? Because ego constantly asks, who is winning? Who is leading? Humility asks, what can I learn? There's a huge difference. Life becomes exhausting when every interaction feels like a scoreboard. Not every success needs to be compared. Not every conversation needs a winner. Sometimes your friend's achievement is simply that, a friend's achievement. It doesn't have to become a measure of your worth. There's another trap we don't talk about often. There's another trap we don't talk about enough. Living for recognition. Imagine doing something kind, helping someone financially, supporting a friend, volunteering your time. Now imagine nobody notices, nobody thanks you, nobody posts about it. Would you still do it? That's a hard question. Because ego loves applause. It loves being seen. It enjoys hearing, you are amazing, you are different, you're the best I ever had. We couldn't have done this without you. There's nothing wrong with appreciation. Oh, we all love it. Oh, I love being appreciated as well. The problem starts when appreciation becomes the reason we do good. Because then we're no longer serving people, we're feeding our ego. The most beautiful acts of kindness are often the ones nobody ever hears about. The school fees paid quietly. The groceries dropped at someone's doorstep without a name attached. The encouragement given when no cameras are rolling. The friend who stays after everyone else has gone home. Those are the moments that build character, because character doesn't need an audience. Let me ask you something. When your friend succeeds, what's your first reaction? Is it excitement or comparison? When someone younger than you gets promoted, do you think, good for them, or it should have been me? When someone you know starts doing well, do you encourage them, or do you immediately begin looking for flaws in their journey? Those questions aren't meant to make you feel guilty. They are meant to help you look inward. Because the battle against ego isn't fought by pretending we're humble. It's fought by being honest about where pride still lives inside us. I'll leave you with this thought today, and this is where we're going to end today's episode of Random Talk with Angie, and next week we'll finalize on the ego trap. If another person's light makes yours seems dim, the problem isn't their light. It's the way you are measuring your own. Your value has never depended on being ahead of someone else. Your value comes from becoming a better version of yourself than you were yesterday. Next week, we're going to finalize by, exploring how ego quietly destroys friendships, workplaces, leadership, and communities, and why the strongest people are often the most humble, so that we can tie everything, have a final reflection, and conclude on the ego trap. As I reflected on this topic a while ago with a friend of mine, it just occurred to me that 15 minutes is not enough to convey the different patterns, sections, and angles we can look at ego from. Thank you so much for coming with me on this journey. And until next time, this is Random Talk with Angie. Have a beautiful week ahead, filled with less ego and more humility.